All right, welcome. So, in the world of English grammar, most verbs are pretty well behaved. They follow the rules, but there's this fascinating little group that, well, they just love to break them. Today, we're diving deep into the story of these grammar rebels, the semi-modal verbs.
So let's just start with this big question, right? Why is it that some verbs are so predictable, they do the same thing every time, while others seem to have a mind of their own? This is the central mystery we're going to unpack in this explainer. It's really a story of conformity versus flexibility.
Okay, check this out. This comparison just nails the difference. On the left, you've got must, the total rule follower. It never changes its form. But on the right, you have its rebellious cousin, have to, and it adapts. It becomes has to when you talk about he. And get this, the meaning completely flips in the negative. Must not is a strict command, but don't have to means, hey, no pressure. That flexibility, that is the signature move of a rebel.
And that brings us to the official name for our group of rule breakers. They're the semi-modal verbs. So let's get to know them a little better.
All right, so what is a semi-modal verb exactly? Well, you can think of it as a verb that's kind of living a double life. It helps out the main verb, just like a pure modal like can or should does, but it also sometimes acts like a totally regular verb. And that's where it gets its rebellious streak. Now, you might hear some other fancy names for them like marginal modals or lexical auxiliaries, but honestly, semi-modal really gets the idea across perfectly.
So let's meet the main players in our story. These are the 6 key rebels we're going to be investigating. Have to, used to, need to, ought to, had better, and the very dramatic dare. And as you're about to see, each one has its own unique way of bending the rules of grammar.
So how do they actually do it? What makes them so different from those straight-laced pure modals? Well, it really all boils down to 3 key behaviors. Here's their playbook. First, they change form. Unlike pure modals, which are kind of stuck, these rebels can change for tense. Have to becomes had to. Easy enough. Second, they call for backup. They bring in helper verbs like do and did to ask questions or make negative sentences. And third, they often have this trusty sidekick with them, the word to, which you almost never see after a pure modal.
All right, it's time to open up the case files. We're going to start with 2 rebels that handle some very common jobs, talking about things you have to do, and talking about habits from way back when.
And first up, we've got have to. This is probably the most common rebel you're going to run into out in the wild. Its main job? To express a really strong obligation or necessity. And you can see that difference right here in action. Must is totally rigid. It's always just must. But have to is a shapeshifter. It changes for tense, for person. And here's the critical part. To ask a question, it calls for backup. Do we have to? I mean, you could say, must we, but you'd sound really formal, maybe a little old-fashioned. See, that's the rebel have to giving us more options. Our next rebel, used to, is a total specialist. Its entire job is to look back into the past and describe habits or situations that just aren't true anymore. This sentence is the perfect example of what it does. It tells you 2 things instantly. 1, I played soccer in the past, and 2, I don't play it now. It's so efficient at getting that idea of change across, isn't it? And this is where used to really shows its true rebellious colors. For one thing, it's locked in the past. There's no present tense version. And just like have to, it needs that helper verb, did, for questions. Did you used to is how we say it. A pure modal would never, ever do that.
Okay, now the case of need to it's really fascinating. This rebel seems to have a bit of a split personality. Sometimes it breaks the rules, and other times it follows them perfectly. I mean, just look at this. On the left, it's a total rebel. It changes tense, she needed to go, and it uses do for questions. That's standard semi-modal behavior. But then on the right, boom, it can transform. In the negative, it can become needn't. You needn't worry. No to, no do. It's acting exactly like a pure modal. It's a linguistic chameleon.
All right, let's move on to our next group of rebels. And these guys, they specialize in some pretty high-stakes communication. We're talking about giving advice, showing courage, and delivering some pretty urgent warnings.
First up in this group is ought to. You can kind of think of this one as the formal advisor. It's a lot like should, but it often carries this stronger feeling of moral duty or obligation.
Yeah, the difference here is really all about the tone. Both sentences are giving advice, but ought to just feels heavier, right? More formal. And its defining rebellious trait is that it is inseparable from its sidekick, to. You can say should apologize, but you absolutely must say ought to apologize. That too is totally non-negotiable.
Okay, next up, had better. And let's be clear, this isn't just friendly advice. This is a flat-out warning. It implies that if you don't do the thing, something bad is probably going to happen.
Yeah, when you hear this, you know things are serious. The unspoken part is clearly or else you're going to be in trouble. And even though it has the word had in it, it's always talking about right now or the very near future. It just adds this powerful sense of urgency that a word like should just doesn't have.
And that brings us to our final case file, featuring maybe the boldest, most defiant rebel of them all, dare. This verb is all about courage and challenges, and its grammar is just as rebellious.
Just look at this. Dare can basically switch its identity whenever it wants. On the left side, it acts like a regular verb using does and to, but on the right, in a classic phrase like how dare you, it goes into full-on modal mode. No helpers, no to. And that ability to play for both teams, that's what makes dare the ultimate grammar rebel.
Okay, so let's just sum this all up. What is the identity of these rebels? You see, they aren't just breaking rules for the sake of it. Their flexibility is what lets us express all these subtle shades of meaning, everything from past habits to urgent warnings. They create this amazing bridge between the very rigid world of pure modals and the very adaptable world of regular verbs. So their rule breaking isn't chaos. It's what gives the English language so much more power and precision.
And all of this leads to one last really interesting thought. Language isn't static. It's alive. It's always evolving. The semi-modals we just looked at were at one point just regular verbs. So the question I want to leave you with is this. Which verbs that we use every single day might be on their way to becoming the next generation of grammar rebels? It really makes you wonder.